Testing, testing, testing. This is Jonathan. I'll be the presenter today, so I just wanted to test the audio for the folks that are in there. We're going to get started here in about a minute. So if for some reason you can't hear this, just let me know. Sure.
All right, well, welcome today. We're so happy that you're here for our new instructor information session. This is our first one, and we are glad to be able to give you a chance to know a little bit more about Perceptive and a chance to ask us any questions that you might have. So Jonathan Olshock will be talking to us today about how to create an assignment. He is the Director of Academic Engagements and Partnerships at Perceptive. We are looking at Jonathan's screen, and I'm going to pass the video over to him.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate that. Seems like from the attendee list, we have a pretty wide variety of institutions, and so the implementation at those schools might be different. So I'm going to try and keep this as general as possible, speak about how Perceptive works, and then we're going to set up a sample assignment. So I'm going to go through the settings of setting up a sample assignment. Let me first start with my agenda. We are going to start, like I said, standard assignment workflow with all the bells and whistles there. Then we're going to move into how grades break down in Perceptive for the students. We're going to create a sample assignment. We're going to take a brief look at rubrics and provide some resources for how to create good rubrics. We just gave a webinar yesterday where we provided a lot of detailed information about rubrics. So we'll provide the resources of how to find that on the web, and also some handouts. And then a few tips for new instructors, especially student-facing messaging. That's really going to be the focus for those tips. And we'll should have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. If you have questions during the webinar, please address those in the chat. And Megan will be kind of manning the chat board. If she's able to answer them there, she might, or we might hold the questions till the end so that everyone can receive an answer, and I'll just answer those out loud. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I wanted to go over was our basic assignment flow. All Perceptive assignments flow in this manner, with the exception of our team member evaluation only, which I'll review at the end. To begin with, students will upload a document into our system. The nice thing here is students can upload any type of document they wish. This could it really gives the instructors or instructional designers freedom to design engaging assignments that are going to assess the skills and content knowledge that you want to assess. You're not tied to multiple choice or a paper here. While the majority of our uploads are written documents in the higher education realm especially, we see everything from video uploads. One of the more creative ones we've seen recently is an online course where they're doing a Gmail video chat. They're recording that and then uploading that into the system to be assessed by other people who weren't involved in the debate. So you can really get pretty creative here as to what kind of assignments you design. All documents that get uploaded into our system, it remains a double-blind process as long as the student doesn't identify themselves within the document. So in the case of the video debate, obviously, it's going to be single-blind, so that they'll know who the authors are. But other than that, as long as there's no identifying information, we wipe all back-end information off uploads and everything so that it remains a double-blind process. Once they've uploaded their documents, they go into a virtual stack and they're waiting to be reviewed by peers. Those reviews, a peer will normally review anywhere from 3 to 6 documents. Most of the assignments we see, it's 3 documents. But if it's a shorter rubric, a simpler assignment, you could bump that number up. The way that the peers assess documents is based on the rubrics that are provided by the instructor for that assignment. And those rubrics are broken down into dimensions. Each dimension contains a commenting prompt and any number of rating prompts that you choose. So often we'll see rubrics broken down into, if it's a basic writing assignment, introduction, transitions, works cited pages, those types of things. And we'll look at a few examples once we get into the sample course. But just know that there's qualitative and quantitative feedback that the students are providing during this phase. Once the students are done with their reviews, the assignment will move into the back evaluation phase. And this is really where we really focus on incentivizing good reviewing and commenting behavior. So the strength of Perceptive is how it takes peer assessment to the next level, is that we incentivize all the behaviors that occur in here. So not only are you going to receive a grade for the document you uploaded, but you're also going to receive a grade as part of your grade for your reviewing behavior, your commenting behavior. And so what that does is it incentivizes students to really put forth the effort. So it takes the traditional hand your paper to someone next to you and write comments on it to that next level. So back evaluations, what happens, the authors of the documents receive all of the comments anonymously that they receive from the reviewers, and they assign that a helpfulness score of 1 to 5. And then they comment back as to what they found helpful, or maybe what they could, how it could have been more helpful for future assignments. A typical back evaluation comment might read, thank you for the input on my introduction paragraph. I appreciate you pointing to the areas of improvement. If you could have been more specific as to what sentence or what area needed improvement the most, that would have been helpful. So what we're trying to do is create a virtuous cycle here. The more you use the system, the better at critical analysis these students are going to become, and the better reviewers they'll be in general. And then finally, the last step of the process is Perceptive uses all the inputs that it received throughout this process and will generate grades in a number of different ways. So I'll talk about how those grades are generated when we get into the actual tool itself. But for now, I want to talk about the categories of grades and how we incentivize each of these steps. So the grades are broken down into 3 categories: writing grade, reviewing grade, and task grade. For the writing grade, that is the grade that the students receive on their document according to how they performed on that rubric. So the system uses the peer inputs from the ratings to inform this writing grade. But it's not just a peer mean, which is what we see a lot of times in a more simpler system. What we do here is we have some statistical analyses that run in the background and use machine learning to assign an accuracy score to each reviewer. That accuracy score then is weighted on the writing grade. So reviewers who are less accurate have much less impact on an author's writing grade than those who are extremely accurate. Then they also get a grade for the reviewing portion of their behavior, and this is where we start to really incentivize that good reviewing behavior here. So we take that accuracy score and we give that a relative grade according to the peers, and that becomes part of their reviewing grade. And then they also receive a grade for the back evaluation helpfulness score they received. So that's what we spoke about earlier when the author back evaluates on a 1 to 5 scale how the comment is helpful to them. So that's their reviewing grade. And then we also provide a task grade. This is simply completion, how many of the actual steps in the process they fully complete. Each of these categories can be weighted however the instructor chooses, so that depending on the assignment type or at the time of the year, they might weight these differently. And I'll speak to why you might want to weight those differently in a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to now jump into Perceptive, the actual tool itself, and we're going to go through the steps of creating a new assignment. So when you go into Perceptive, the first screen that you're going to see, whether you log into your standalone course or you log in through an LMS, you're going to get to this screen. Actually, I take that back. The first screen, you'll be prompted to enter just some basic information about your course, which populates up here. And then from then on, you'll be entered into this screen. So this course now has no assignments. The assignments would be listed down here at the bottom. So let's take care of that and create our first sample assignment here. So I go to the assignments menu and I just click on new assignment. And I'm taken to our assignment creation wizard here. Now, because Perceptive is so configurable, we really want to make it applicable in any setting, whether it be a science course, a math course, a writing course, even down to middle school level courses. We want the instructors to be able to adapt the assignments how they want. So it is a little bit overwhelming at first for new instructors because there are so many settings. And that's why we're providing this. And also we have a lot of great documentation about how to make the right selections here. But usually the defaults are gonna lead you in the right direction. The first thing you'll do, enter your assignment name. Just gonna give it a test. And then this is your assignment description. This is what the students will see on their assignment overview. So what we often see here is a description of what the students are expected to submit, whether that be a lab report, a writing assignment. This is where you put your description here. So I'm just going to put some test text in there so I can move forward. You can see that this is a HTML editor. So we see some instructors including tables or images, links out to resources. All that's available within your assignment description section. The next options you have to change are the assignment type. So in Perceptive, we have 4 assignment types. Those are regular individual submission, which is 75 to 80% of our submissions are in this category. We have a group submission. With a group submission, rather than an individual uploading a document, one of the group members will upload the document, and that acts as the submission for anyone that's listed in that group. Then the process that we showed earlier in the workflow moves through at an individual level. So they'll individually review documents, and they'll back evaluate the comments that they received. We also have a training assignment, or we also call this an instructor upload, which is how it's more frequently used. There are no student uploads in this version. So the instructor will upload the documents, and they will review those documents according to the rubric. A good case study for this would be in a law school. Maybe they are doing a case evaluation or some sort of a law literature review. An instructor might put up 2 different cases, and they want the students to go through and use a rubric to evaluate the effectiveness of those cases. So that's a good use case for the training assignment. And then finally, what we're really excited about is this team eval only assignment. Team eval is something that we've had a lot of requests for, and actually some customers mistake our tool for a team eval tool. So what that assignment type does is, rather than submitting anything, you will just be tasked with evaluating your group members' performance on a group project in a class. This can be a standalone assignment, so it doesn't have to be a submission in Perceptive. You could have a group project, maybe it's presentations that you work on in class, and then afterwards you just want to get some feedback about how the groups were operating. You could use it as a team eval only. If you decided to add that to a group assignment, that's also a functionality we have available. So if you're doing a group assignment in Perceptive, that can be an added task that gets added in after the submission, where the groups will go in and assess each other using that team member only. And if you want more information about that functionality, since it is so new, we're actually giving another webinar coming up shortly about that team eval only, and we also have some documentation in our knowledge base. A lot of resources for you to use that there. I'm going to leave this sample assignment on regular individual. The submission type, so students can upload a file, and our system will accept any type of file you choose. You can provide them with a text box if you wanted a simpler just text upload. And you can also allow them to submit a URL. So we've seen this with VoiceThread or YouTube or GChat, like I said, or even Google Docs. If the students want to submit as a URL, they can do that. Teacher grading only, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pass on it. That's a more advanced setting, and I'm just going to leave that as no for now. Same with these other 2, back evaluate or anonymous and back evaluate. If an instructor chooses, they can turn off that back evaluation step. We highly discourage that. There should be a pretty specific use case that would require you to turn off back evaluations. In most cases, we want to go ahead and leave that on so that the students get some feedback on their reviews. Click to the next section here. So this is reviewing. This is where you control how many reviewers there are. On a standard assignment, you can see that it's 3 as our default. Most instructors should leave that at 3. That's going to give you some really valid and reliable grading. It also will prevent student burnout. So one of the things we don't want to do here is have a super extensive rubric, let's say 40 rating prompts and 10 commenting, and then have them do 5 reviews on a 10-page paper. That's just going to overload students. They're going to burn out pretty quickly. So setting it at 3 is a pretty good rule of thumb. Is the assignment self-evaluated? If we wanted to, we could also offer the students a self-evaluation during the reviewing phase, where they'll go through just like one of the reviewers would on their document, use the rubric, and rate their document so they can kind of get a feel for how they think they performed according to that rubric. Reviewing style, we always want to leave it assigned 1 at a time. There is another option. If you are interested in that other option, you should definitely contact our support desk. It is a manual process and is extremely heavy lifting on the instructor side. So we always suggest leave it assigned one at a time. If you have a use case where you want to assign specific reviewers, reach out to us and we'll kind of walk you through that process. Instructor review. Okay, so this is a really neat feature about Perceptive. Not only is it a peer assessment engine, instructors can also get involved in any way during the review phase they want. So if it's a smaller course, a small seminar, a lot of times instructors, they'll review right alongside the peers. So they'll go in just like they're one in the set of the peers. They'll provide comments, they'll rate according to the rubric. It'll be factored in just like they're a student to output the grades. You also have the choice to override all student reviews. So if for some reason you just want to use the student reviews for feedback and not for the actual grades of the writing, you can do that. And a sliding scale. So if you wanted to set the percentage of how much impact your review will have compared to the peers, you would use the sliding scale. I also wanted to mention here, one of the really best practices that we encourage, especially in really large enrollment classes, we see this used in courses up to 500 students. One thing you can do in those high enrollment classes is spot check documents. And in that case, maybe you jump in and do 10 documents, 15 documents, where you're going in and you're reviewing, you're providing feedback, etc. This really gives you a good feel for where your students are on the assignment. It also, because instructor reviews are considered 100% accurate, it will adjust the accuracy of the reviewers who are associated with that instructor review. So it's a really good way to kind of get involved in the process if you just want to, if you don't have the ability to grade all of the documents, but you want to grade a few, that's a really good way to do it. You're also able to allow bonus reviews if you choose on any assignment. That allows students to pull an extra review down, and you can give a percentage to add to their grade for doing those bonus reviews. These are our back evaluation prompts. I'd say 98% of instructors just leave the back evaluation prompts as they are, but you do have the option to go in here and change the descriptions or the prompt if you choose. Grading options. So this is interesting. Down at the bottom here, you see the weights, and this is what I spoke about earlier. So the document grade or the writing grade is here, and then reviewing grade and task grade. A really great way to introduce Perceptive in your class is to give them a legitimate assignment, something that's some academic work behind it. It doesn't have to be the most extensive assignment you ever thought of, but it should be academic in nature, so that they get the feeling this is a tool that's used in serious academic settings. But the way that you can adjust, because it's the first assignment, just set this task grade much higher than you normally would, reduce the writing and the reviewing grades, and then that way, as long as they complete the assignment, kind of get a feel for the system, their grades will reflect pretty highly, and it's a really good way to introduce that. I also wanted to mention the two grading styles we have here. And what the grading style does is this is what produces the writing and accuracy grades. So they are relative in both of these cases, relative to the other students in the course. If you choose curved grading, you set the mean and standard deviation and then what Perceptive does, it takes the inputs from the students and it populates them according to that curve. What I really like about this feature is at the beginning of the semester, you can set your mean at 85-10. They might not perform as well according to the ratings, but the grades aren't going to reflect that necessarily as much. So you want to see that growth over a semester, especially if you're using common rubrics. And this is a great way to show students their growth, see the growth from students, but not necessarily negatively impact their grade at the beginning of a semester. And then the other style is benchmark grading. With benchmark grading, the system will deliver to the instructor the 5 lowest scored documents, the 5 highest scored documents, and the instructor assigns a percentage to those. Once they do that, the system will set a high and a low point based on those percentages, and the rest of the student grades will be distributed linearly between those 2 points. So it's still relative, but it allows you some flexibility to set your high and your low point for those grades. I'm going to leave this one curved. Go ahead to my my next section. Late penalties. Oftentimes, so let me just mention this. Students can upload their documents late, up to 24 hours before the reviewing window closes. This is a great feature here. So even if a student's late on it, they can upload that document a little bit late. There will be a penalty applied to that, but you can waive that pretty simply. So it really gets our submission numbers up, and the system handles it well. It just puts a priority on those to be reviewed by the next reviewers that show up. You also have the ability to open up a window for late reviewing, not used quite as frequently because it does delay the back evaluation process for all students. So, but some people will set this for 1 day and add a little bit of a penalty if someone reviews late. Deadlines. So there are a number of deadlines that you must set before the document can get started. The submission deadline, you have your, the assignment publication date, then you have your submission deadline. You can leave this window. You kind of have a feel for how long you want to give your students to submit a document. I'm going to set this one for a week out. The review deadline. So the window between submission and review is really important to think about what that should be. For a shorter assignment, 3 days is probably fine, even 2 days, depending on what the assignment is. If you're assigning a 10-page paper and a pretty extensive rubric, you're going to want to give them a big window, at least a week. Kind of play it by ear. You can kind of have a feel for how your students' pace is, but think about how much work they're going to be doing during this review period before you set that window. And then we have our back evaluation deadline. During that phase, back evaluation doesn't take as much lifting from the students, so we often see a 1-2 day back evaluation window. But again, it's up to the pace of your students and kind of get a feel for how quickly they do that. And then finally, we have our advanced settings. They're pretty straightforward. The one I wanted to point to was this one here, hold grades for manual release. Oftentimes, instructors will leave this as no. So the system will, as soon as the back evaluations are complete, it will push the grades either to the Perceptive gradebook or the LMS gradebook. But if you want to have a little bit more control and hold those and review them before you release them, just set that to yes, and it'll hold them until you click the button that says release grades. And that's our settings for our new assignment. So what you'll be directed to next is creating your rubric, what we call dimensions. I'm actually not going to do that within the tool. I'm going to jump back over to my slideshow to discuss these dimensions and rubrics briefly, and then give you some resources that will be much more in depth about how to do that, so you can seek those out on your own. So our rubrics, like I said earlier, consist of 2 elements that are categorized into dimensions. So the screen on my right is one dimension. We can see that it's called introduction. The text over here within this window is the commenting prompt. For this assignment, this instructor, I mean, they're given some serious direction for what they're looking for in those comments. And that's often really helpful. It helps the students be specific and look for specific things within that document. This is probably on the really high end of a lot of text. Some of them get shorter with, it depends what kind of comments you're looking for. And then here we see a number of rating prompts. You can have as few as 1 and then as many as you like. So this is a way, when you categorize these rating prompts into dimensions, that you can reduce the workload for students as far as commenting goes, because each dimension must have a commenting prompt. So if you had 20 dimensions, then you're going to be asking students to provide 20 comments on the feedback. So really think about that as you design those rubrics. Again, here are some resources. We'll provide this video at the end, and I wanted to provide you some links here where you can get more information about creating rubrics. It's a really important part of designing an assessment in Perceptive, so definitely look at these 2 resources to help you guide as you build those out. The first one is an article in our knowledge base, and the second one is a recording of our webinar that we just gave yesterday. That's not up on our channel yet, but will be by the end of business today. So if you visit our YouTube channel, that will be there, as well as this webinar will be up there as well at some point in the next few days. All right, lastly, before we get to Q&A, is the tips for new instructors. And if you'll notice, these all are discussing how to sell it to your students, how to message it to your students. This is a crucial step, and something that some instructors don't really put in the forefront of their mind when they're preparing to do peer assessment in their classes. But the more bought in students are, the better the reviewing and the commenting is going to be. So we really want to front load the students with information about why we chose peer assessment. And for most instructors, the reason they chose peer assessment is they believe in the pedagogy behind that. They want to have their students collaborate with each other. They see the benefits of providing more feedback to each other than a single instructor could ever give. And also giving a really granular look at the performance level of the students. So as a student, I'm not just going to receive 1 grade and try and figure out why I got a B or a D or an A. I can take a look at all the ratings that my peers provide and say, oh, I see that my introduction needs some work. I get it. Or any category that you choose. So really selling that to your students that there's a lot of benefits here and it's going to improve their learning and improve their grades is a good place to start. Like I mentioned earlier, using a real assignment to introduce perceptive is a good idea. We see a lot of instructors with best intentions introduce an assignment that's more of a fun, how was your summer kind of assignment. Those work fine as well. But using a real assignment really drives home that message that this is a truly academic procedure that we're going to do here. This is something of value to you for your growth as a student. So that's often how we do it. And then, like I said, just adjust those weights on the grades so that the students it doesn't impact their overall grade too much in the course. And then finally, another great resource. Every student should read this article before they begin reviewing. The Be a Helpful Reviewer article gives them a bullet point list of how to provide good constructive criticism, good critical analysis of their peers. It also talks about some of the grading analytics in our system. So it gives them a really good picture of how to be a good reviewer, which if you translate that into student language, it's get a good grade. So that's available there. And what the kind of basis for this document is, you want your students to act like you. As they rate their peers, as they comment on the documents, you want them to think in their mind, what would my instructor give this document? What would my instructor comment on this document? And I'll tell you what, 9 times out of 10, those students know what you would give on that document. So if they use that as kind of a crutch for how to be good at critical analysis, we see a lot of success in those types of environments. Okay, so that is all the information I have. We have about 5 minutes left for Q&A. Did we have any in the chat, Megan?
We're still learning the technology. Should I unmute?
Sure, yeah, let's open it up, and if anyone has questions, they can go ahead and jump in here and ask any questions they'd like. All right. Well, if you're trying to share a question out loud and you can't, just give us a shout in the chat, and we'll see if we can activate. Oh, there comes one, I think.
We've got a question here as well. Jonathan, can you give me an example of the research that points to Perceptive's validity?
Okay, sure. So as far as the validity and reliability of our grading goes, we have tons of documentation for that. Perceptive was developed at the University of Pittsburgh. It took about 10 to 12 years of research at this point has gone into it. One of the studies I find that people can relate with the most is we did a study that compared AP teachers to the AP expert reviewers, and then the students using Perceptive. So the students submitted their AP essays to the AP board. They were assessed by those AP experts, and they were also assessed by the teacher, and then also in Perceptive by the students. And what the research found was that there was actually a tighter correlation between the student grading and the expert assessors than the teachers to the expert assessors. And it was pretty close. So we saw that all 3 of the scores were right in the same wheelhouse as to what they would have given.
Thank you. What do you recommend the deadline time should be for submissions?
Okay, the number one issue here when setting up a deadline time is do not set it for midnight, because it is extremely confusing for everyone, students and instructors alike, whether it's the day before or the day after. So that midnight, as long as it's not midnight, pretty much it's kind of up to you. We see a lot of instructors use the 11:59 p.m. Time, so that's the end of the day it's submitted, or also kind of end of business for some schools where they set it for 5 p.m. But just try to avoid that midnight deadline. That sometimes gets confusing. All right. I think that seems like everyone got their questions in. If there's anything else, I can take it now. If not, oh, here's one. When we're talking about 7-page documents, it probably has a lot to do with what your rubric looks like. If your rubric is very extensive, let's say you have 5 commenting prompts and 20 rating prompts, you want them to take some time on those. So I would say with a 7-page paper, you want to leave at least a week there, I would think, for that reviewing to happen. Maybe 5 days. But yeah, I think, and you'll get a feel for it, especially once you start using Perceptive, how long it takes them. But just like any assignment, you're going to see a lot of students that last 48 hours are going to be jumping into review. As far as like time spent reviewing, we have in our activity logs. So all instructors have access to the activity logs of all the students. So what you can do is, we don't have anything where it's just a one-click push that data to you. But if you look at their activity logs, you can see what time they're logging in, what time they started their review, and what time they ended that review. So that's a really good feel. If I assume that question is, as a former teacher myself, that's, I wonder why this student did so poorly. Let me look at their activity log. Oh, they started their reviews an hour before that was due. So you can definitely identify that information there, but we don't push any total time on a review data.
Jump in. If you're trying to estimate how long the review period should be, you want to remember that the students are not familiar with reviewing in general. So however long it would take you, it's going to take the students double, maybe even triple the amount of time that first time until they become a little bit familiar with the process. So you want to estimate, you want to give them more time rather than less time at the beginning, and then you can probably make it a little bit of a shorter amount of time once they're used to the system.
Great questions, folks. Okay, we're right at the 30-minute mark, which is about how long we wanted to allow for. If there's any more questions, please feel free to reach out to our support desk or reach out as a reply to this webinar. Like I said, we're going to make this available on that YouTube page, and we'll also follow up with an email to you with a link to the video and those resources that I discussed in here. Thanks for your time. If you have any other questions specifically, our support desk is great at helping instructors get started. Everyone on the team is a former teacher or professor, so we've been in the trenches and we can help you out. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for coming, and I hope everyone has a nice weekend.